Hello aspirants, welcome to AITAREYA Institute. This is your daily current affairs session for 13th July, where we'll comprehensively cover the most important national and international developments which are relevant for your UPSC Prelims, main as well as interview stage. So let's begin without any further delays. So the first news article that we'll be covering is the third India-Australia annual summit that has happened. Now, this summit is very important in terms of your prelims questions that can be developed from it. Along with that, a dedicated mains question could also be asked vis-a-vis your India and Australia. For instance, first of all, what was the news? The news was that the Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, visited Melbourne to participate in the third India-Australia annual summit. Okay, so it happens annually, and since the past 2 or 3 years, this has been happening, and this was the third such event. Both leaders adopted a landmark joint statement, and there was a joint statement after the end of discussion, then meeting, to strengthen the comprehensive strategic partnership. Okay, strategic partnership. So, one thing that could be asked is your comprehensive strategic partnership. Okay, so like with which all nations India has a comprehensive strategic partnership. So you can, in the comment section, you have to mention this. Like apart from Australia, do we have the comprehensive strategic partnership with any other nation? So try to answer this in your comment section. Then I'll be taking up in the comment section itself. So the CSP, what is CSP? It's a formal, wide-ranging agreement covering the parts of defense, trade, energy, education, and people-to-people ties. Okay? So all aspects of a bilateral relationship have been covered from defense. Now this becomes particularly very important in terms of your Malabar exercise that we conduct. Along with this, the Quad, India is a part of Quad as well as Malabar exercise. Take care. So all because of all these reasons, this bilateral relationship, particularly with regards to defense, becomes very important. Trade is very important. Why so? You can read more about RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Okay, so along with the ASEAN nations, India is trying to deepen its ties with the ASEAN nations. So ASEAN nation vis-a-vis your RCEP. Now here Australia could play an important role here. Okay, that is why trade becomes very important. Obviously, apart from that, the bilateral trade that is growing between India and Australia. Apart from that, energy, energy ties. Okay? Energy ties in this, one thing very important is coal. Other things are also important, but coal. India imports a substantial amount of coal from Australia. So this is why the energy relationships also are very important. So coal, you must have heard about two types of coal. One is your coking coal, other is your thermal grade coal. Okay. If you're not aware about about the difference, please revise your static notes, coking coal and thermal grade coal. So a lot of India does not have substantial amount of coking coal. And this is also known as met coal, met coke, or metallurgical grade coal. Okay, coking coal. Take a metallurgical grade coal, and it is used in which industry? Iron and steel industry. So this coal is not essentially used for energy production, but in iron and steel industry. Why? How it is used as a reducing agent, for the iron oxide. Okay. So in order to separate the iron from the oxygen, it is used what? Met coke is used. So a large amount of coking coal or met coke India imports from Australia. Okay. So then of the educational ties, very, very important. A substantial amount of Indian students visit Australia for the educational purpose. Okay. various places from, particularly for like you have Melbourne, you have Queensland, okay, and various other places where the Indian students prefer to move towards Australia. Okay, then people to people ties are very, very important. Why? Because of the various events and incidences associated with racial discrimination that the Indian people faces in Australia. And that is why precisely why your people to people ties are very, very important. Do not ignore this point while writing your mains answer. Okay. This might not be asked in your prelims, but in your mains answer, people, students and aspirants tend to ignore this point, people to people ties. Okay. So the partnership was originally established in 2020. This summit marks a significant elevation of the bilateral engagement across each and every strategic dimension has been covered during this summit. I hope this is absolutely clear. So what is India-Australia Annual Summit? The India-Australia is the highest level bilateral engagement so this is the highest level bilateral engagement mechanism between the two countries. Now this is convened annually. Every year it happens to review, renew, and expand the comprehensive strategic partnership. So this comprehensive strategic partnership, unlike most of the people think that it's a kind of a static thing, but it's a dynamic partnership that keeps on evolving with time, and a new aspects of relationship keep on growing. Okay, so with time, with the needs and necessity of the both the nations try to deepen their ties. Okay, so it's an ever evolving ties and relationship, and that is why this CSP, the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, that is reviewed, that is renewed, annually. Okay, so it brings together both the prime ministers of both the nation to set the agenda for cooperation across defense, trade, energy, technology, education, and even culture. Cultural integration is also needed because a lot of Indians reside in Australia, and so the culture of Australia is being influenced by Indians. Okay, so you have to keep a note of the cultural aspect as well. Okay, technological, educational, and all this. And since this summit includes the prime ministers of both the nations, and this is why this is the highest level bilateral engagement mechanism. Okay, so this summit was held in Melbourne. So this could be asked where it happened. It happened in Melbourne. So this could be asked in your prelims to produce a robust joint statement translating the strategic intent into concrete time-bound deliverables across every pillar of the partnership. Okay, so all these some of these points you can use it for your prelims, and you can use it for your mains, and few of these things you have to remember, you have to remember for your prelims. So established in 2020, it's an annual summit mechanism institutionalized to ensure accountability. How so accountability? Because you are creating time-bound deliverables, okay, and sustained momentum. What is the format? Head of government. We have seen this bilateral meeting supported by ministerial dialogues, working groups, and sector-specific task forces. Okay. For instance, you can take trade. In trade, you can take up specific kind of niche trade that will be happening between India and Australia. Okay, so this is very specific task force. So, for instance, cells for we can create cells for FDI, FIIs, okay, in order to streamline and smoothen the incoming of the foreign direct investment to India. Okay, so this was the third edition. You have to also remember this. And recently, if you have seen the prelims paper of UPSC, a lot many factual nitty-gritties I have been asked. So this is why you need to be clear in your head as to which edition it is also. But since particularly all those events in which the head of the state is involved, the head of the government is involved. Okay, so especially in this, So since this is the highest level bilateral engagement, that is why you have to keep a note of all of this. So this was held in Melbourne, produced agreements spanning defense. All these things we have already covered. Okay. So next is defense and maritime security architecture. So in this, as we have already said, defense is a very, very important part of India and Australian ties. How so? So this defense cooperation emerged as the centerpiece of this third summit. Okay, while both nations announcing interlocking agreements that elevate their security relationship into an unprecedented level of institutional depth and operational interoperability. ठीक है, operational interoperability. I hope you must be well aware of this term interoperability. Okay, which means that the ability of their armed forces to work together seamlessly. Okay, so essentially what the word interoperability means is that all the different you know, pieces of defense will be streamlined, integrated, and the word is how will they be integrated? Seamlessly. Okay, all let's say for instance, you have a fighter aircraft. For instance, you have a fighter aircraft, and it has a communication systems. Okay, so the communication system must be well aligned with the aircraft as well as the ground system, along with the storage system, along with other aspects of defense and architecture. Okay, so all these things must, as simple as it may seem, it is a very difficult and tedious task, and this is why the term is being, increasingly used. Okay, you have joint security declaration. And after the summit, we had a joint security declaration. It was a milestone joint declaration on defense and security cooperation was announced alongside an annual defense ministers dialogue. So apart from the summit that we had, and alongside we also had a annual defense ministers dialogue, especially to elevate the services level interoperability, ensuring regular structured cooperation between military establishments. Okay, between different military establishments, there is complete and seamless integration. Okay, then you have your maritime security roadmap. Both the nations launched India-Australia Maritime Security Collaboration Roadmap and formalized the historic MOU. What was MOU for? A binding. See, this is why it is important. This MOU is binding agreement of intent between the Australian Maritime Border Command and Indian Coast Guard. Okay, so this is why this becomes very important, especially because of the initiative Sagar initiative, you know, which is India's Sagar initiative, which is security and growth for all in the region. So India, what it is aiming is to provide and become the net security provider, or providing the security architecture in the Indian Ocean realm. Indian Ocean realm. This is the agenda of India. India is trying to be the leader of the Indian Ocean realm. Okay, so for that, this agreement, this MOU between India and Australia becomes very important. One thing, another thing is that India is intending to become the leader of the global south. Now, global south does not mean geographical south. Okay, for instance, the global south does not include Australia. Does not include Australia. Okay, so defense industrial integration. So plans have been formalized. What kind of plans have been formalized to conclude this MOU? To conclude this MOU for the provision of defense articles and defense services. Now, this is supported by the placement of an Indian military instructor Now, an Indian military instructor will be placed at the Australian Defence College in 2028-29, which would further deepen the military educational link. Okay, so various aspects have been covered to integrate the relationship. Okay. Now, another thing with regards to your trade, critical materials, critical minerals, and supply chain resilience. Okay. What does it mean to have a supply chain resilience? When your supply chain is resilient, then any shocks that you will witness, the impact of those shocks will be significantly less if you have a resilient supply chain. Okay. For instance, if due to some reasons, okay, for instance, I'll help you explain this. If let's say this is India and India is importing, say, let's say this is China. It is importing an article A from China and it is solely dependent on China. Now, if something happens between India and China, like what happened in Ladakh, if any skirmishes happen in the Ladakh region, in the Kashmir region, then this trade will be significantly impacted and this will lead to inflation in India. This will lead to inflation in India. And that is why the idea is to hedge the risk. How will you hedge the risk? Risk can be hedged by diversification. So you need not to be dependent solely on China. So you have to include other international players as well, like Australia, like Japan. Okay. So you need to have multiple players involved, another nation. So even if one partner, the supply chain from one partner gets disrupted, you have alternate means and measures. And this is why there have been discussions around China plus one. Okay. All this you can include in your mains answers. Okay. Now the idea is to move towards the SICA. Take bringing on the active economic cooperation and trade agreement (ECTA). Now ECTA is an early stage bilateral trade deal, bilateral between two nations trade deal which is already in force. Now, both leaders are committed to accelerating the finalization. Now beyond this ECTA, we are trying to finalize the SICA. SICA is Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. Now, what is essentially this? This is a full-scale free trade agreement, full, complete, which will include your goods, your services, your investments, your regulations, all this, all the aspects of trade will be covered. And that is why the term comprehensive. Okay. So the ongoing tariff reductions under ECTA have already boosted our agriculture and textile shipments. But in order to further enhance the trade, in order to further deepen the trade ties between both the nations, what we also need is comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. Okay. Then this news article is very, very important. A question could be asked directly in UPSC. The summit formalized project-based investment pipelines between government agencies and private firms, Okay, project-based investment. So the idea is to secure long-term offtake. What is an offtake? Which is a guarantee that you will purchase the agreement. Okay. So it's a guaranteed. Okay. Refining simply means converting your raw materials into certain usable forms. That is refining. Value addition. Now this becomes very important. Your value addition. Okay. Value addition capabilities for critical technology minerals. So you are not only providing the raw materials, the raw thing, but also, not only providing, the raw material, the raw thing, but also processing it and converting it into some usable forms, and further also adding other utility factors like you can include lithium along with it. You can include cobalt. You can include, nickel, which all these are essential for your semiconductors. And I hope you must be well aware of the fact that in terms of semiconductor, Taiwan is a leading nation. Okay, Taiwan, and you'll need all these critical minerals for your electric vehicles. And you must be well aware of this, that India launched the National Critical Mineral Mission. National Critical Mineral Mission in 2025 itself. Okay. So joint ventures frameworks allow Indian entities to co-invest directly into mining assets across the Western Australia. Okay, so the entire idea here is that Indian companies like Adani, okay, so they will be directly investing in these mining assets in few of the regions of Australia, particularly Western Australia, where a large and substantial amount of your critical minerals are found. Okay, I hope all this thing is absolutely and crystal clear. Okay, next that we are going to discuss is with regards to your climate, your energy, and space technology, three aspects. So, with regards to your uranium export arrangements, so leaders have signed the administrative arrangement under the bilateral nuclear cooperation agreement. So, we have signed this nuclear cooperation agreement. One second. This nuclear cooperation agreement, which enables long-term Australian uranium exports. So a large amount of uranium, and since particularly the targets which we have set for the nuclear energy production, those have been revised. Now that has been already discussed in the current affairs section. Please do mention in the comment section what are what are the nuclear energy targets of India. The medium term goals and the long term goals by 2047. What are the nuclear energy targets? Do mention them in the comment section. And that is why the uranium exports become very important to India, because we hardly produce uranium. Very few mines in India produce, like the Jadugoda mines. In the Andhra region, some regions are there. Then Mahadek Basin in Meghalaya. So some of the regions produce uranium, but overall, with regards to the amount of nuclear energy that we have envisaged to produce, we require huge amount of uranium imports to India. And that is why we have signed this Australian uranium exports to India under the IAEA safeguards, International Atomic Energy Agency. India is, please do remember this, that India is a signatory to IAEA safeguards as well as additional safeguards as well. India has signed the additional safeguards as well. Okay, so this has been asked once in your prelims. There is a possibility, since this is in current affairs, this could be again asked. For all those who say the questions do not get repeated, I will say please have a look into the previous year questions. The themes often get repeated, and this is why this topic becomes very important. So internationally monitored, these are your internationally monitored protocols which ensure that nuclear materials which we'll be importing are exclusively used for peaceful civilian energy purposes and not for military purposes, not for creating missiles, not for using them in your missiles. Okay. Second is the renewable energy partnership. So under the joint under the joint statement on energy security, the summit operationalized the rooftop solar academy. Okay, the rooftop solar academy to drive the decentralized electrification. The idea is decentralized electrification. Now, this how? Through solar energy, bringing solar power generation directly to homes and communities rather than relying solely on large centralized power plants. So, the idea is decentralized electrification, and India is particularly focusing on, since India has established International Solar Alliance. Now you have to mention this. Who leads the International Solar Alliance along with India? Which other nation does that? I'll give you a hint. It is one of the nations from Europe or European Union particularly. The headquarter of ISA is Gurugram. Please do remember this. It is not Delhi particularly, but Gurugram. So you have to keep a note of all these small points. Third is the space infrastructure integration. So Australia confirmed the ongoing tracking support for the Gaganyaan human space flight program. So we will be initiating the space flight, the Gaganyaan. So India's first crewed orbital mission. This becomes very important because this is the first crewed orbital mission by commissioning a temporary space tracking terminal on the Cocos Keeling Island, providing critical time telemetry. What is telemetry? It is remote monitoring of the satellite from the Earth. Okay. So telemetry coordinates for the mission. Okay. So with regards to your Gagan human space flight program, we'll be collaborating with Australia. Okay. Next part is your educational mobility and cultural pacts. So Australian campuses will be established in India. So the UGC, which is your University Grants Commission, which is the India's apex higher education regulatory body. Now this issued a letter of intent to Flinders University for a campus in Bangalore and a letter of approval to Victoria University for a campus in Gurugram. Okay. Now this all will bring a world-class Australian pedagogy directly to the Indian students. So what we are doing is internationalization of HEIs. So what is HEIs? Your higher educational institutions. So this is what the government of the day has been doing. There was a question in I think UPPCS on this internationalization of HEIs in prelims, but in UPSC and other exams, there is a very high chance that a dedicated question on internationalization of HEIs could be asked in your mains. Very high probability, and you can use this content in your mains answers. Okay, so try to you know include some of the current related events that are happening in your mains answer. That will give you an edge over the other students. Okay, so one is this. Second is your Matri grants rollout. So what Australia has done is it has announced a $10 million allocation for Center for Australia-India Relations, which is referred as your Maitri grant. Maitri essentially means friendship in Sanskrit. Now, the idea is to deepen the people-to-people links. How will you deepen people-to-people links? Through scholarships, through cultural exchanges, through community programs. And do not ignore this. And so instead of writing simply people-to-people links, you can mention this and a specific event which will make your point different from the rest, and other people will writing simply people to people links. What kind of value addition are you making in that point is through mentioning these kind of initiatives. Okay, so another is Bhubaneswar Skilling Hub, so a national center of excellence for skilling in mining in Bhubaneswar, Odisha, and are delivering specialized vocational credentials to thousands of local technicians in advanced mining and resource extraction practices. So, if there is a question on skilling, you can include this factor, can include this point, and but highly unlikely that a dedicated prelims question would include this point. Okay, in mains you can definitely include it. Okay. Next, strategic opportunities vis-a-vis your India-Australia relationships. You will be unlocking the comprehensive bilateral trade after you have finalized the CICA. So with finalization of CICA, what will happen is the non-tariff trade barriers will substantially get reduced. What do you mean by non-tariff barriers? And a tariff barriers means as a percentage of any taxes that you will be imposing. Okay. But in non-tariff barriers, the focus is not on taxes, but on regulatory procedure, simplifying the regulatory procedure, the procedural aspects. And so the idea is ease of trading. Just like we have said, ease of doing business. So one of its component is ease of trading. Okay. So regulatory, procedural, and standards-based obstacles to reduce to trade beyond the import duties. So whenever we refer to import duties, that is your tariff barriers. That is your tariff barriers. Apart from your duties, what all rest of the things are your non-tariff barriers, regulatory, procedural, standard-based obstacles. For instance, sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Now, this is a non-tariff barrier that the China has been, particularly using when it comes to the imports coming from India to China. Okay, so these are your non-tariff barriers. So if you remove them, this will certainly help the businesses. This will optimize operations across the two massive consumer markets. And those tariff drops under ECTA have already generated early momentum in the agricultural sector and textile sector. Now, we have already discussed this. Second is securing clean energy feedstocks. Domestic. India can secure its domestic semiconductor. And India has launched this semicon mission, semiconductor mission, and electric vehicle push that India is pushing towards. By importing certified lithium and cobalt. There have been a question in prelims on this EV thing. Okay? On specific things related to EV, there has been a question in prelims. Okay. So a dedicated question on the EVs. If you have a dedicated question on EVs, then in that point you can include that deepened the bilateral relationship, the comprehensive strategic partnership between India and Australia. So it's a key raw material for batteries and chips from Australia, reducing dangerous dependence on single source suppliers. Whenever we say single source suppliers, then we are essentially referring to suppliers from China. So the idea is China plus one. Next is deepening space exploration. Okay, we have already discussed it, the telemetry links, the vocational skill deficit. We have also discussed this. In Bhubaneswar, the Bhubaneswar Mining Center would be established. We have discussed this. What will be the challenges? Now, this will be asked. You have to mention it in your mains answers. So, weaponization of economic interdependence, trade exposure to dominant regional non-market powers creates vulnerability during supply chain shocks. Okay, so if you have a regional non-market power, okay, so that can create or increase your vulnerability. Second is countering cross-border terrorism. So you have online driven radical networks which threaten the democratic institutions, which was seen like at Pahalgam and Bondi Beach. You know? So Bondi Beach was expected last year in this prelims that in terms of location-based question, a question could be asked on Bondi Beach, though it was not asked, but yet you have to be prepared on such lines. So third is your disruptions to maritime choke points. And maritime choke point, how come? So you have been witnessing conflicts in West Asia which threaten the energy flow and raise the shipping cost. Okay. The third is disruption in maritime choke points, and fourth is slow realization of trade treaties. So you have domestic lobbies, you have regulatory complexity, which have delayed the transition from ECTA to Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. Okay, why? Because of the domestic lobbies that are created in both the nations, which are self-centered. So they realize that these lobbies do realize that if external dominant players will come in, then the market share will be distributed between them, especially if they are providing better services and better products. Now, last is persistent gaps in global governance reforms. So you have structural resistance delays to UN Security Council reform. India has been pushing for the UNSC reforms for quite some time, and in this In this thing, India and Australia relationships could go a long way. Okay, despite Australia backing India's permanent, Australia is backing India's permanent seat. Okay, so while third summit represents significant diplomatic progress, both partners must navigate these challenges to fully realize the for the full realization of the comprehensive strategic partnership potential. I hope this is absolutely clear. If you have any doubts, please do mention them in the comment section. Okay. So yes, then you can mention all these points in your way forward. Okay. Moving forward, you can read all this. Okay. You can use this in your conclusions. Main points you have already. Next is your India-Kyrgyzstan ties. India-Kyrgyzstan tie-up to study the shared epic heritage. So India and Kyrgyzstan have jointly established the International Center for Civilizational Studies, Manas and Mahabharat, in where the capital of Kyrgyzstan, which is Bishkek. Okay. The idea is to strengthen the cultural and academic cooperation between the two nations. This initiative also marks the release of the first Hindi translation of the Kyrgyz epic, which is Manas. So this will promote deeper civilizational dialogue and improve the literary accessibility for the Indian readers interested in Central Asian traditions. Okay, so this is an important point which you can use if you have any question on culture. So this is how you integrate your answers for the culture with current affairs. Okay, so first Hindi translation. Okay, so this is why this is very important. Another thing is with regards to Bishkek. Now, since in terms of geography, for all these nations like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, you have to remember their capital and their arrangement from north to south and east to west. So this is your homework. Okay, like for Kyrgyzstan, for Tajikistan, for Uzbekistan, what is the capital, and arrange them from north to south. Okay. So about the center, it is jointly established by the CSIR New Delhi and the Manas National Academy, which is at Bishkek. Okay, so the center serves as permanent platform for the comparative research on Mahabharata, which is in the Indian Sanskrit epic, and the Manas, which is the foundational Kyrgyz oral epic tradition. So, which is one of the longest epic poems in the world. Okay, so features comparative epic studies will be conducted in terms of the shared cultural values, philosophical traditions, the historical narratives, and literary motifs. Second is academic collaboration will be undertaken. Okay, between Kyrgyz universities and the Indian universities. Hindi translation of Manas will be happening. This is the first ever Hindi rendering of Kyrgyz. Okay, this will strengthen India's soft power. Please try to include this point in your answers. Soft power of India. This will be strengthened through it. So instead of writing simply a generic point, like India's soft power, you can make it very specific by mentioning this example. And last is your strategic significance. This will deepen the India's engagement with Central Asia. Okay. Next is TribeX. TribeX. It's a digital learning platform. This was released by Union Minister of Tribal Affairs. In Union Minister of Tribal Affairs, he launched this TribeX, first of its kind digital learning platform, which is dedicated for tribal arts, culture, traditional knowledge, and skill development. So it's a comprehensive centralized digital learning ecosystem and repository which is created to preserve, document, and globally showcase India's rich tribal cultural heritage. Now it acts as an open access gateway for the learners, researchers, enthusiasts worldwide to study directly under master tribal artisans and indigenous knowledge experts. So आपको इतना ही you only have to remember this, that this is a digital learning platform, TribeX. Okay, that will be it. Okay, digital learning platform. Features: free certificate courses will be provided, 20 free certificate courses covering tribal art, paintings, handicrafts, handlooms, traditional musical instruments. All this will be provided. And approach graduate diplomas. So 5 UGC recognized diploma programs will be undertaken through an MOU. Okay? MOU with, there's a university, you don't need to remember this name, SSU Varanasi. Specializations include Santali language. So अब आपको you have to remember this Santali language, Santhal tribe, and the script of Santhali language is your old Chikki script. This is the point that you have to remember. And the Honorable President of India is also associated with this tribe, and this is why this becomes even more important. So you have tribal arts and craft, tribal textiles, museology, tribal museum management, all the different aspects with regards to your tribes are covered under it. Your diplomas will be provided under these aspects. You have a multimedia heritage archive will be created. It will contain more than 5,000 multimedia resources, including audio recordings, documentary videos, verified literature, capturing the tribal festivals, their rituals, and oral history. Moreover, the technology infrastructure will be created around it. So it will be driven by learning management system, LMS. Okay, so you can include this point also. Next, a very important news article, Astra Mark 1. Astra Mark 1. So during a bilateral summit in Jakarta, so India and Indonesia signed a landmark defense deal. Now India will be supplying the indigenous Astra, very important. Take indigenous Astra. It is beyond visual range, air-to-air missile, BB-RAM. Very important point. You have to remember this point. Take it. A dedicated prelims question could be asked regarding Astra missile. Okay, so it's a class of air combat missile capable of engaging and destroying aerial targets distances far beyond what a pilot can visually identify. So essentially, it exceeds 50 kilometers. Developed by DRDO and produced by BDL, Bharat Dynamics Limited. So Astra Mark 1 represents India's major milestone, India's defense export ambitions. Okay. So certain technical details around it, the speed is Mach 4.5. What it means is it can travel fast, not just faster than speed of sound, but 4.5 times the speed of sound. You have to remember this, 4.5 times the speed of sound. Its range you have to roughly remember, not exact number, roughly 80 to 110 kilometer engagement. Okay, and it is BVRAM, beyond visual range, air to air missile, not a. So if let's say I'm an examiner, how will I confuse you? I will simply say that it is a air to ground missile, or the ground to air missile, something like that. I will change, instead of saying that it is an air to air missile. Okay, altitude above sea level to 20 kilometers. So it's a 3-phase guidance, internal navigation. You will have mid-course radio updates from the launching aircraft. Along with that, you have a radio frequency seeker, RF seeker. Now, what is the use of this RF seeker? Radio frequency seeker. It locks onto the target, autonomously locks onto the target and resists enemy from electronic jamming. So the enemy will find it difficult to, jam this missile, electronically jam this missile because of this RF seeker. So it's a smokeless propulsion, single pulse solid fuel rocket, that leaves no vapor trail. Okay, since it leaves no vapor trail, it conceals the aircraft's position. So aircraft can fire this, and then it can move away from that position, and the enemy will not be able to locate or identify as to from where the missile has been fired, from which location, from which aircraft this missile, from what is the location of that aircraft from which the missile has been fired. Okay. So platforms on which this has been integrated is the Sukhoi 30 Mark 1. And now we are integrating it for our own LCA Tejas Mark 1. along with Rafale. Okay. So Astra Mark II, whose range has been extended to 200 kilometers. It is also a dual pulse. Sorry, it's a dual pulse, unlike Astra Mark I, which was a single pulse. But it is also solid rocket motor, a propulsion system that can reignite during terminal approach, eliminating escape windows for the target. Okay, so it can reignite during the last stages. It can reignite so that the target is unable to escape. Okay, and the most important thing here that you have to remember is the Gandiv. And I think it was in 2024 when it was successfully tested. Again, this is in news. Astra Mark III Gandiv. No, by the way, Gandiv was, do mention in the comment section. It was in Mahabharat, whose weapon was Gandiv. Okay, so under DRDO development, it uses, now this is very, very important, solid fuel ducted ramjet technology. A dedicated question could be asked on the solid fuel ducted ramjet itself also. But along with that, it could also be integrated with Astra Mark III Gandiv. Okay. It's an engine that sustains constant propulsion, constant propulsion by drawing in atmospheric air. Okay. So what it is using is atmospheric air. You have to remember this. Okay. So it is shaped and structured such that it will be using atmospheric air during the flight, targeting an intercept range exceeding 350 kilometers. So earlier Mark 1 range was around 100 kilometers, Mark 2 was 200 kilometers, and Mark 3 exceeds 350 kilometer range. Next important news articles. Once, weekly basal insulin a weekly. So global healthcare giant Novo Nordisk announced the official launch of a weekly. It's a generic name of insulin icodec in India, making the country the 7th market worldwide to introduce this breakthrough drug. So a weekly is the words first and only, once weekly. So you have to give it once only in a week. Now, once weekly basal insulin, a long-acting background insulin that maintains stable blood sugar levels. I hope you must be well aware of the insulin. You must have read it in your sciences. Okay. Over a full 7 days. So only once you have to provide this insulin in 7 days. Very, this is the first time that has ever happened in the entire world. So all those people who are diagnosed with either type 1 or type 2 diabetes mellitus can use this. So I hope you must be well aware about what is diabetes. It's a chronic condition where the body cannot produce or promote enough insulin to regulate the blood glucose. Okay, so blood glucose could either sharply rise or sharply fall because of body unable to utilize the insulin. So you can remember this because this has happened first time in the world. Okay. A weekly, you can read about it, how it is clinically superior. In all the global clinical trials, it demonstrated superior blood sugar management compared to standard insulin dosages which we are giving. So key outcomes include reduction in HbA1c levels. It's a 3-month average blood sugar indicator to assess whether you have diabetes or not. And it significantly improves the time in range. What is time in range? The percentage of time the blood glucose stays within the healthy target zone. Okay. This was achieved without increasing the hypoglycemia risk. What is hypoglycemia risk? If you give too much amount of insulin, then if you give too much amount of insulin to reduce the blood sugar, there can be an instance where the blood sugar can fall substantially, and that can lead to an event of hypoglycemia. So from one extreme, from hyperglycemia, you are moving towards hypoglycemia. So while solving one challenge, you are moving towards another issue, which is hypoglycemia. Okay. So you can use this. So the cost per unit cost has been 23 rupees and weekly dose cost is 260 rupees. Okay. So with this, we come to end of today's current affairs session. I hope today's discussion helped you understand not only the news but also its relevance from the UPSC examination perspective. So remember that consistency in following current affairs is one of the biggest differentiators in this exam. So revise today's topic once again, make concise notes and try to connect them with the static portion of the syllabus. If you found this session helpful, do like the video, share it with your fellow aspirants and subscribe to our channel. Okay. So if you have any doubts or suggestions or you feel free to mention them in the comment section itself. We'd be happy to help and thank you for joining today's class. Keep learning, keep revising and stay consistent. I'll see you in the next current affairs session. Until then, take care and happy learning. Okay.